Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just another minute as we have a lot of people hopefully joining us tonight, restarting Cafe Oleh. So give us another minute or so and we'll get started. Okay, let's get started as more people join us. Welcome, everyone, and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. If you've joined us in the past, thank you for coming. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. Cafe Oleh is our session that we've been doing with Nefesh B'Nefesh for the past 4 or 5 years now, and since the pandemic online, where we provide you with the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your utility bills, going grocery shopping, keeping up with the news at even the most introductory levels of Hebrew, striking up everyday conversations, how to flirt, how to interview for a job, all the everyday words that you use in your respective countries of origin and languages, but in Israel, in Hebrew, at its most accessible, perhaps in a way that your Ulpan doesn't teach, or whether you learned Hebrew in yeshiva or day school, or you never learned it formally, this is your one-stop shop for that. Really excited to be relaunching Cafe Oleh with you. I've led you through many lessons here on Zoom. We are soon going to be launching once again in-person classes. That's how we first got started in the Nefesh B'Nefesh Tel Aviv hub, just on Rothschild. We're excited to be launching age-based in-person groups in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. We're also going to be taking Cafe Oleh on the road throughout Israel to other big populations of Anglos like you and me. So whether you're in Modi'in or Ra'anana or Beit Shemesh or Carmiel, please be in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you and build with your community Cafe Oleh on the road. As always, just a few bits of housekeeping. These lessons are for you. They are completely free, and we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover that we haven't covered in the past, or perhaps review them in a different way. You can see all of our previous lessons on YouTube. All of our previous playlists are up there. If you have questions while I'm teaching, please write them in the Q&A section of the menu. Please refer anything else with regards to topic requests. You can't see me well enough, you can't hear me well enough, anything that doesn't have to do with this specific class, please write that in the chat. I will only be looking at the Q&A, as it is very exciting to have currently 286 people on this call. Really excited so many of you want to learn everyday Hebrew with me together. As always, I will be sharing my screen with you with the vocabulary we're going to go through today. And today is perfect as we are starting our winter session of Cafe Oleh. What better to start with than wintertime? Wintertime in Israel may be no big deal for some of you. For others, it may be quite the culture shock. I know quite a number of fellow Olim, especially Anglo Olim, like to joke about wintertime in Israel, how crazed Israelis get about inclement weather, whether it's cold, whether it's wet, and thinking that they overreact. Well, coming from a major American city where we overreact over a quarter inch of rain, let alone snow, I understand where they're coming from. Also, the way Israel is set up paradoxically for needing so much rainfall, it's not quite set up to take so much rainfall. And some of the words we're going to go through today illustrate exactly that. We're going to go through some weather terms. We're going to go through some clothing terms that aren't necessarily so available looking up in a dictionary. You needed someone with a little bit of time in Israel and also personally retail work in Israel to know these words. And also wintertime food. Israel has very specific wintertime foods that are unique there, or at least only make an appearance in the winter. If you have any questions along the way, like I said, Q&A, I hope to have some time at the end to go through as many of them as possible. So with that, let me open up today's vocab list. As always, you are encouraged, welcome to take a screenshot to old school pen and paper. Part of our rebranding, and you'll see that coming soon, is you will have access to these spreadsheets from now on. We're really excited to provide that as part of this upgrade of Cafe Oleh. When that will be, just like when this lesson will go up on YouTube, I don't want to give you a timeline because, again, this is all brand new for us. So thank you in advance for your patience. If it's not within the next day or two, have a little bit more patience for us. Okay, let's get started. So, wintertime in Hebrew. As you see, as always, the Hebrew will be in the middle of the page, transliteration on the right, English on the left. So first off, what is the word for winter? The word for winter is simply choref or choref, depending on how you say the letter resh. It's one of the 4 seasons, just like all of them. We have actual winter in Israel. We have lots of microclimates in Israel, but even if you are not living in high elevations where they will have snow, and we'll get to that in a little bit, you certainly call it winter, regardless of where you are, and you'll see that based on the temperature and the amount of precipitation we have. So let's start with some clothing terms, because these can get tricky, especially for those of you coming from colder climates, more temperate climates, and you're thinking what to bring, what not to bring. I can tell you, living in Israel for many years now, just over 16 years, you do get acclimated to warmer weather. So anything below 20 degrees centigrade does start to feel cold. I know that may sound ridiculous to some of you. 20 centigrade is somewhere around 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Number one, you will get adjusted to the weather. Number two, you will need to get adjusted to centigrade. I promise it's not that difficult, my fellow Americans. So with that, let's get started. Our first word is very simple, me'il. Me'il is a coat. This is a proper winter coat. Okay, this is not a raincoat. You can have a me'il geshem, a raincoat, but when we say me'il, we really mean a me'il lachoref, a coat for winter. We mean a long coat, a thick coat, a warm coat. That is different from our next word, which is jacket. Okay, jacket is exactly as it sounds. It's a jacket. Simple as that. Next word, galbim. Galbim, many of you probably know this word. It means socks, and that ayim at the end of a word tells you that it's a pair of something. It's two of something. So you can have one sock, which is a gerev or gerev, but galbim, socks normally come in pairs, galbim. Interesting about galbim, it is both male and female, feminine and masculine as a word. You'll see on the left-hand side, I put in the genders of the words when appropriate. There are some words that have gender. Most words in Hebrew have a gender. Some don't. You'll see a few examples that don't coming up. But for this case, galbim can be referred to both in masculine or feminine. So if you're adding an adjective after it, excuse me, that is important to know that you can either say galbim adumim, red socks, masculine, or galbim adumot, red socks, feminine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about who's the subject or the object. This is one of those few words you can take a deep breath, not have to worry or obsess about gender. Either way, you're good to go. There aren't many of these, so enjoy your galbim, your socks. A word that comes from the same root, the same shoresh, the same three letters that all Hebrew words have at their core, have a unique shoresh at their core, is galbionim. Okay, if galbaim are socks and two socks, galbionim, pantyhose. Galbionim, the singular, even though we don't wear one pantyhose, because the idea is that it has two legs, even if it's one whole piece, that on, galbion, when you hear the word, the sound on, the suffix on at the end of the word, it usually means the diminutive. That's the fancy word for something smaller, okay? So a yeled is a boy, yaldon is a little boy. Okay, so same here. Galbionim is understood to be a different iteration of a sock, something to cover your foot and at least part of your leg. Galbionim, pantyhose. Okay, as opposed to our next word, just like we had the difference between me'il and jacket, one is Hebrew, one is not in origin. Same thing here. Galbionim, Hebrew. Tights are tights. Tights are obviously not Hebrew in origin, but we use them in Hebrew to mean everything from tights to stockings. That's also an important distinction. Tights as in tights that you would wear out, to stockings that you perhaps wear out, but perhaps with a skirt over it. But that's the difference between pantyhose and tights, galbionim, tights. One other piece of footwear for some of you who are a bit more retro or are dancers or just need to stay a little bit extra warm this winter, chutlot. Chutlot are leg warmers. Okay, if you don't know what leg warmers are, I suggest you watch the film Flashdance. You'll have a sense of what they are, or you can just look them up on yourselves. But chutlot, for those that's important, leg warmers. Next word. Another piece of footwear, magafaim. Magafaim are boots. These can be rain boots, these can be snow boots, these can be regular boots that you wear going out on the town or in the city or wherever you live in Israel. Magafaim is masculine and they are boots and of any size, any style as well. Okay. Next word. Gutkas. Gutkas is another word, clearly not Hebrew in origin, but we use it in Hebrew all the time, in Israel all the time. Excuse me, this means long underwear. This can also, by the way, mean for ladies, long underwear in the form of knickers or anything that's long. So think long johns, think thermal pants, anything like that is Gutkas. Okay, a lot of people, especially when they go trekking after their army service, or sometimes even in their army service, depending on when they're posted in Israel, will need to buy Gutkas for their service, or certainly for their trip if they're going somewhere cold in South America or in South Asia, wherever it may be. Elionit. Elionit is not a word that you hear all the time, but if you want to get very specific about clothing, this is a good one. Elionit can mean anything that is Elion. Okay? Elion means upper, right? It comes from the same root as me'il, right? The me'il is put al or me'al something, on top of something, above something. Elionit is the same thing. Elion means upper or the utmost. So elionit is something that you're going to wear over something else. Okay, in this case, you could think of it as a wrap or as a cardigan. Anything that you're going to wear on top of something else. Now, I know that cardigans are usually thought of as sweaters, but in Israel, we're thinking about this in terms of layers. Remember, it gets cold, but not that cold. So the idea is if you're wearing an elionit, you're probably not wearing something on top of the elionit. That is the thing that is elyon. Okay, that is the thing that is me'al. You're hearing the sounds that are the shoresh being used in different ways. Elionit, something that is worn over. Okay, or on something else. So a wrap, a shawl even, you could call an elionit, a cardigan. Something though that fastens is much more of an elionit. Okay, as opposed to an actual sweater. Now you will hear the cognate sveder or sveder. Okay, and you'll see it spelled here. In the Hebrew, you see on the right-hand side, sveder. That can mean a sweater. You can also use the Hebrew word for sweater, which is sarig, or sarig. Sarig comes from lisrog, to knit. Those of you who are familiar with a kippah sruga, a knit kippah, I don't wear one, or currently don't wear one, that is, but a knit kippah, often it says a lot about who someone identifies, how they identify politically, spiritually, ideologically. But lisrog is to knit. So kippah sruga is a knit kippah. And the sarig is the Hebrew word for sweater, meaning that it's knit, right? Any knitwear you could also call sarig, but specifically when we're talking apparel, it means a sweater. Obviously, not all sweaters are knit. I understand that, but this is the term that we use. Okay. This is a interesting word. Again, this is sort of this is a combination of a couple different things. So a dubon. Dubon, again, you hear that on at the end, meaning a small thing. Dubon is a weatherproof coat. It's usually the top part of a coat. Those of you who go skiing, you can think of like a ski jacket, those big puffy things that are also weatherproof and waterproof, most importantly, if you fall in the snow. Those of you who have served in the military here in Israel or abroad, or have children who have, and they're stationed in cold places particularly, they're usually issued a dubon as part of their medim, their army unit uniforms. And again, it's a thick coat. It's a waterproof outside for standing in the rain, standing in the snow for long periods of time. Dubon comes from the word dov, meaning a bear, the idea that a bear has a thick, insulated, weatherproof coat of fur on it to keep it warm and, most importantly, dry when it's cold and wet out. Okay. Kfafot. Kfafot are gloves. We do not distinguish necessarily between gloves and mittens in Hebrew. Kfafot is the general term for both of them. So when you are looking for kfafot, you could say kfafot bli etzbaot, without fingers, or im etzbaot, or simply just ask for kfafot and then find the ones that you like or don't like on your own. Etzba is a finger, etzbaot are fingers. So kfafot im etzbaot, the idea of gloves with finger spaces, right? Or kfafot bli etzbaot, meaning that they don't have individual finger spaces. Okay. Seif. Seif is a scarf. Pretty simple there. That can be any kind of scarf, but it specifically refers to a scarf. Okay. Another important word when it comes to apparel is the adjective mirupad or mirupad. Mirupad, any of you who have gone furniture shopping in Israel already know this word. Mirupad means lined or padded. In furniture term, this is the term that we use for upholstered. But mirupad is anything that's lined or padded. Okay, so especially if it's cold where you live in Israel, if you live in higher elevations in Israel, if you live in the north of Israel, you're going to want a me'il mirupad or a jacket mirupad, something that is lined or padded. Okay. Equally, what is lining called in Hebrew? Bitna. Bitna is lining. Okay. It comes from the same root and even the same word as beten, stomach, right? So the thing that lines you, the thing that's inside you, the thing that's keeping you warm. So when you look at a clothing label and you want to see what it's made out of, and specifically the lining, you're going to look for the word bitna, and then it will have the type of fabric listed next to it. Sometimes it'll be kutna, cotton. Sometimes it'll be tsemer, wool. Many times it'll be polyester. I think that one speaks for itself. Long word, begins with a pay, it's polyester. And finally, in our non-comprehensive, non-exhaustive, but still good start list of winter wear in Israel is the word capuchon or bardas, but you're going to hear capuchon much more often. If you have kids in Israel, if you yourself are a kid at heart or like to dress a little informally, you already know this word. Capuchon is what we call a hooded sweatshirt or hooded shirt, a hoodie, if you will. Apologies if I'm sounding a bit what's the word? looking down on it. That's not my specific type of wear, but it does come in handy in Israel. It's sometimes just easier to put on and go out to do your groceries wearing a capuchon. That's what it means. It comes from the French, obviously the same root as the Italian word cappuccino, meaning the coffee with a hood, because that was the style of monks that wore them. The Capuchin monks, with the hood. Capuchon or bardas. Either term means both a hood as well as a shirt that has a built-in hood. Specifically, we're referring to a hooded sweatshirt, but this could be any form of clothing that has a built-in hood. Okay, sometimes you will hear the separate word for hood. As you know, some jackets have a detachable hood in the back. That would be bardas. Okay, but otherwise, capuchon is the word you want. Now, let's get into weather, cold and dry and wet and all those things, and hot, and some important ways to distinguish these things, and also what not to say. Very important in teaching you a living language and how to use it is the terms that you should know, and you may not necessarily want to repeat, or at least you know what someone else is saying to you when they say them. So let's start with hot. First off, the word for hot is cham. Okay, it's an adjective, cham, chama, chamim, chamot. Okay, cham is an adjective. From cham, we also get the word chamim. Chamim means warm. Okay, so I just said that hot, the way we conjugate it, cham, masculine, chama, feminine, chamim, plural, chamot, plural, feminine only. Chamim would be chamim, chamima, chamimim, chamimot. Okay, but from the word cham, we get the word warm. Just like, by the way, the reverse, and we'll see in a little bit, is kar. Kar or kar is cold. Kar is cold. Karir is cool. Okay, not cool as in someone is cool sociologically, style-wise, but temperature. Okay. Lechamem. Lechamem is to warm something up. Okay. To warm something up. So if you want to warm up food in the microwave or on a stove, this is the word that you're going to use, the verb that you're going to use rather, lechamem. This is then the infinitive form, which simply means to do something. It's not conjugated in time or place or gender or anything like that. So that's also why there's no gender associated with this verb, lechamem. When you go to conjugate it, you will need to conjugate it accordingly based on gender as well as time. But lechamem simply means to warm. And then its opposite form is lehitchamem, to get warmed up, right? So if I could say in Hebrew, ani mechamem et hamarak, I am warming up the soup. And then I could subsequently also say hamarak mitchamem, the soup is getting warmed up. Okay, that's the difference between these two verbs, subtle but important. Which one is the subject? Which one is the object? In the first one, I'm the subject. In the second one, it's the soup is the subject. Okay, what is the warming? Who's causing the warming, or what is being warmed? Depends on your focus of the sentence. Okay, but lechamem, lehitchamem. If you simply want to say I'm hot temperature-wise, perhaps the thermostat is too hot, too high in your house, or the space heater is, or it's just hot outside. It's legitimately hot out. And you want to say I'm hot, you'll simply say chamli. Okay, it literally means cham, hot, li, to me, or for me. Okay, this is the same, by the way, for all genders and all people. Right? So if I want to say chamli, I'm hot. If I was female and I want to say I'm hot, I would also say chamli. The li is the thing that gets conjugated. So if I'm going to ask someone, are you hot? Right? And I want to ask a woman, are you hot temperature-wise? Chamlach, is it hot for you here? That's how I would change that. Chamli, chamlecha, chamlach, and so forth. Okay, the next one is not to be confused. All right, only when you want to ask, is someone too hot, or is it too hot in here? Are you going to say chamli? You will never, ever, listen to me, folks, very quickly if you're writing in the Q&A, do not ask someone or say out loud, ani cham. Okay, that does not mean I am hot. Do not translate I am hot literally from the English to the Hebrew, it means I'm hot in a very different context. If that's what you mean, by all means say it. We have other ways to say that, but ani cham does not mean I am hot temperature-wise. As you see the triple X here, that should say enough for you. Okay? So, Chamli, I am hot. Not the other way. That is a literal translation from the English. Chamli, I am hot temperature-wise. And then finally, the other word for hot, I just want to throw in there because we're already using this word quite a bit, is charif. Okay, charif means hot and spicy. Okay, it means spicy. It does not mean hot as in, we often say hot temperature-wise. That's not the same thing. A hot pepper, we call hot, but it really, we're talking spice. Okay, so spicy as in hot is charif. Okay, let's get to some weather terms, as we've been talking about hot and cold. So weather, we've talked about this before when we've talked about small talk, and remember all of our previous lessons are on YouTube. So if you're asking me when do we talk about this, you can see all of them. Just type in Cafe Oleh, youtube.com. You will see all of our, in one playlist, all of our previous lessons. So mezeg havir means weather. Okay, the weather outside, mezeg havir. Mezeg ha'avir is the weather. If I just want to say weather in a very general way, mezeg avir, without that ha in the second word. Mezeg avir, like many words in Hebrew, is a compound word. In Hebrew, we call that smichut. We create a lot of words in Hebrew like this, and expressions and ideas, because Hebrew is a very conservative language in the amount of words it has. It has some beautiful, very unique, specific words, and some words need to be created by putting together two or more nouns. Excuse me, in this case, mezeg avir, the weather. Okay. Bachutz, outside. Bifnim, inside. Very simple. Bachutz, bifnim. Avir. Avir or avir means air. Okay. Avira, if we add a hey to avir, we get the word avira, which means atmosphere or ambiance. And from the same root, we get the word me'avrer or me'avrer. Me'avrer is a fan, right? The thing that causes air to flow. Me'avrer. So some of us like to sleep with just a fan on. Some of us don't when it's colder out. Just so you know, the word me'avrer is a fan. Not usually a fan that you use like this, but usually an electric fan that's either on the ceiling or that oscillates standing up. Also included in winter, by the way, and we have the word winter again here because we're talking about seasons and weather. I want to make sure it was there again. But just before winter, and technically we're still in stav. Stav is, for some English speakers, fall, for other English speakers, autumn. Whichever it is, stav is that term. Stav is usually a very short period in Israel, but it has a very beautiful word attached to it that you can see in some places in Israel, which is shalechet. Shalechet is the act of falling leaves or leaves falling. Okay, shalechet comes from the same verb as lahashlich, to fall away, to throw away. Those of you who have a stronger Jewish tradition, traditional background, and you know the word tashlich from Rosh Hashanah, where we cast away our sins symbolically through things that are found in our pockets. It's the same root here. Lahashlich, to throw something away. Shalechet, something that falls down or falls away, i.e. leaves. Shalechet only refers to leaves falling in the autumn. Again, we're very conservative with words. We have very specific meanings sometimes. This is a great example of it, and a beautiful word anyways. Let's move down to, because we've done Choref already. Row 37, Sagrir. Sagrir or Sugliri. This is a hard word. If you're trying to nail down that sound resh, as I always say in my classes, don't worry about trying to make the sound resh. You can say resh, you can say resh. We are a country of immigrants. We all come with our own accents. It's really okay to have one. So Sagrir or Sugliri means dreary or blustery or rainy. You're going to see this word used quite a lot in the forecasts when it's exactly one of these things outside, typically in fall and winter in Stav and Choref. Saglir or Sagliri. It's not often, it's not all the time. The default in Israel usually is not gray and dreary and blustery in the winter, but it can be, especially when there's a storm coming through. This is a good word to know. Very important word to know in the winter, and I'm going to explain along with Sugliri in just now. Me'unan. Me'unan and anan. Anan in row 39 means a cloud. Ananim are clouds. And me'unan. Me'unan means cloudy. You're going to hear this word a lot in the weather forecasts. If you haven't read the weather forecasts lately or in general, or if you have, you know this word, me'unan. Why is this important? Think about that for a second. Think about doing laundry in Israel. Most of us in Israel, at least newer buildings or buildings that have been apartments and houses that have been built in the last 30 plus years, have what we call a dud shemesh, a solar water heater, right? This is both to conserve energy. It's much more efficient. And with a dud shemesh, we don't need a dud chashmal. We don't need an electric water heater. Remember, in Israel, when you turn on the tap, it isn't always automatically hot. And those of you who don't know this will figure this out fast if you don't have a dud shemesh, or if it's me'unan or saglir outside. If there's no sun and it's me'unan, there's no sun to heat up the dud shemesh. Right? So therefore, you will see in the forecast when it tells you if it's going to be me'unan, or we're going to get to the word for partially in a bit, so you know whether or not to flip on the dud shemesh, so you can have hot water for your showers and doing your dishes and laundry and everything else. Okay, very important word in the winter is me'unan, to know if it's me'unan outside or not, and what it has to do with laundry. Also, by the way, if you and not just hot water for your laundry, but also drying your laundry on a line, which many Israelis do. Not all Israelis have a meyabesh, a dryer for their clothes. So therefore, to hang them up, they need to make sure there's adequate sun for it. If it's me'unan, probably not a good day to do laundry. Okay. We have a lot of words for rain, folks, and that's important. Remember that we are a rain-dependent country living on a rain-dependent piece of land, and our tradition is, Jewish tradition is full of words and importance about rain. Remember, we start praying for rain towards the end of Sukkot, and we start praying for rain just at the end of Sukkot, and we stop praying for it around Pesach. That corresponds, and you will see this living in Israel, more or less to the beginning and end of the rainy season, on time every year for thousands of years. It's pretty amazing. And so we have very specific terms for rain. You can think of it like the cliche of Eskimos who have dozens of words for snow. A similar thing here, because rain is so important to us, we need to differentiate what types of rain there is. And you're going to hear these terms used when you listen to the weather forecast in the winter especially. So first, geshem. Yes, you're normally taught geshem means rain. Geshem in modern Hebrew, in the modern state of Israel, typically means heavy rain. Okay, it is not the same thing as just rain. It is particularly heavy rain. Okay. That is the difference between geshem and another word that is very common in Hebrew. It's related to other words in Semitic languages having to do with rain, which is matar or matar. Okay, this word is matar without the dots and bars under it. It's also the same way we spell the word meter in Hebrew, meter, but here we're talking about matar. Matar is a rain shower. Okay, it's rain, but not as intense as geshem. So that's also important. Oftentimes when it rains in Israel, it's usually a matar, or as we're going to get to, mimtarim, showers, as opposed to a rainstorm, a deluge. Okay? And all of that is different from tiftuf. Tiftuf, or the plural tiftufim, drizzle. Okay, tiftuf literally means sprinkles, but you can think of it as drizzle. Okay, much lighter rain, or just light rain if that's easier to remember. Our next words, row 43, sufa and se'ara. Okay, sufa and se'ara, both of these mean a storm. And these are pretty, you can swap between these two. You'll hear both of these, sufa and se'ara. Okay, both of these mean a storm of some kind. The adjective stormy is so'er or so'er. So'er, so'eret, so'arim, so'arot. We use this word stormy, by the way, not always referring to the weather. Stormy meeting, a stormy conversation, meaning that it was full of emotion, maybe some anger, maybe some sadness, or something else along with it that was full of drama, you could call it, right? Is stormy, so'er. Excuse me, mimtarim. Mimtarim are rain showers. You're going to see this word used a lot when oftentimes it's just light rain, especially for those of us who live in the center of the country. A lot of our rain oftentimes is mimtarim. It's simply showers. Showers meaning that it's a passing band or a couple bands of rain, but light rain, not a heavy rainstorm. Maybe 5 minutes of serious rain and then it tapers off. That's what we mean by mimtarim. Okay. A big one in Israel. This is a big, when we watch the forecasts in Israel and it becomes, there's precipitation and it's cold enough, it does indeed snow in Israel. The highest elevations are up in the Golan Heights, in Mount Hermon, and some of the mountains on the ridge of the Golan Heights, and then in the upper Galil, Galil Ha'elyon, Galil Tachton, the upper and lower Galil, Harei Shomron, or Harei Melkaz are the terms that we use for the mountains in Samaria / northern West Bank or in the center of the country. Yerushalayim, it certainly can snow, as well as in Har HaNegev, in the upper elevations of the Negev desert. Even though we call it a desert, it does indeed snow, much less rain there on occasion. Sheleg is a big occasion in Israel. Obviously, people are glued to their TV sets and the forecast when there's a chance of snow. It's a big buildup. The idea of it's going to snow and where it's going to snow, especially if it snows in Jerusalem. Besides, it's absolutely beautiful when it snows in Jerusalem if you don't have to go outside. Remember, Jerusalem is the biggest city in Israel, population-wise. So it's also a big impact on everyday life when it snows in Israel. Think of all those hilly roads and slick sidewalks that are not good when it rains, let alone when it snows. Sheleg is the big deal. When we're talking about sheleg in everywhere except the northern Golan Heights, we're not talking about huge amounts of snow. We're talking millimeters, maybe a centimeter or two, sometimes bigger. Okay, but what you're going to hear is it lehe'arem or ne'eram. Lehe'arem is to pile up. And usually the verb is conjugated because sheleg is male, ne'eram. Okay, so when there's a forecast, it's not just about is it going to snow, is it going to stick? Instead of using the word stick like we do in English, we use the term ne'eram, meaning to pile up. Arema is a pile, and that can be a pile of anything, but lehe'arem means to pile up in this case, right? So is the snow going to stick? Literally in Hebrew, is the snow going to pile up? Okay, we talked about kal and karil before, but just as a reminder, by the way, those same rules go for what we said about how to say I'm cold and how to not say I'm cold. Karli means I am cold, but if I were to say ani kar, it means like I am a frigid person in every respect that means. So do not say that, only say karli, I'm cold, if you happen to be cold. Or if you want to say I'm not cold, lo karli. Okay. Yavish, yavish means dry. That's everything from your skin to clothing to fabric, whatever it may be. The opposite is ratuv, wet. Okay, very important. Ratuv also, by the way, gives us the, from the same root, we have the word rotev or rotev. Rotev is sauce or dressing. Okay, the wet stuff you put on food. Rotev comes from the same root as ratuv. Lach is another adjective. It means humid, Those of us who live in the center of the country know all about when it's humid outside. It also can get very humid inside because many of our homes are not insulated, thus can't deal with the extreme changes in weather and moisture inside. And we'll get to those words in a second. Na'im means both nice and pleasant, as in na'im me'od, it's nice to meet you, but also na'im outside. We often say it's na'im as a forecast term, which simply means it's nice outside, right? It's gonna be blue skies. The weather isn't too disagreeable. The temperature isn't too disagreeable. This is the term that we use. Temperature, we use the term temperatura. Clearly not Hebrew in origin, but we use this a lot. You'll hear the term medidat chom. I'm not going to write that here because simply temperatura is more than okay. But if you're talking about what specific temperature it is outside, you're going to use the term ma'alot. Ma'alot are degrees. Okay, and remember, folks, this is Israel. I.e., like the majority of the world's inhabitants, we use centigrade in Israel. So there are plenty of handy dandy guides how to convert the big things from Fahrenheit to centigrade or Celsius, whatever you want to call it. Just know you're going to need to start paying attention to that, because when you hear the weather forecasts on the news or on TV or on the radio or on newspapers, and we're going to talk about that when we get to some media literacy in the next few weeks, it's all going to be in Celsius/centigrade. So get used to understanding when it's 20 ma'alot, 20 degrees centigrade versus 30 ma'alot, and what's the difference in that? All those fun terms. Another very common forecast in the winter is barad. Barad is an interesting one because barad means hail. By the way, also means a slushy drink. So any of those machines that you see that have slushy drinks coming out, it's also called barad. Barad is a specifically winter phenomenon in Israel. I know that in some of your places of origin, barad, hail, happens in the spring and even the summer. In Israel, it only happens in the winter. We're going to get to another thing that's a little seasonally different in a second, but barad means hail. Okay. And yes, it's the same word used as one of the 10 plagues of Egypt. Some hail often comes in very small forms. The farther north you get, and even on the coast, sometimes in Israel, you can get barad that's quite big. Matuach. Matuach, just like the word so'er we had before, stormy. Matuach means tense or volatile, often a word that we use to describe the weather if we're trying to be a little bit more creative in our terminology. Kitzoni means extreme. Sometimes there's going to be, sorry. Where did I go? Sorry, folks, just 1 second. My video just went out. Yuval, if you're on the call, could you help me out with that, please? I hope you can still all hear me. Okay, I hope you can all still hear
Jay,
me with
I
that.
see your video.
You see my video? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's odd. My preview window went out, but that's okay, as long as you can see me. Thanks, Yuval. Okay, Kitzoni, we just went through. Bilti Yatziv, number 59 and 60. Yatziv, number 60, here means stable. You're going to hear this a lot. Again, weather terms. I'm giving you a lot of weather terms because sometimes the weather can be odd, or you're trying to understand why your fellow Israeli citizens are freaking out over the weather. Yatziv and bilti yatziv. Yatziv, number 60, means stable. We can use this term any way. That can be a medical condition. That can also be the weather. Is the weather stable outside, meaning it's not going to rain or snow or be particularly windy or anything like that. Versus the opposite, which is bilti yatziv. Bilti is from the same origin as the word bli. Many of you know that means without. Bilti yatziv is simply, think of it as the un in unstable. right? Bilti is the yatziv is stable. We talked about meunan before. This is a word that you'll often see written with it in forecasts. Meunan chelkit, partially cloudy. Okay, so if it's not just cloudy, it's meunan chelkit, partially cloudy. This is an adverb. This is one of the few words in Hebrew, by the way. Adverbs are a class of words in Hebrew that do not have a uniform rule of composition, meaning there is no uniform way that we create adverbs in Hebrew. You simply learn them. This is a great one. Partially, chelkit. Related to the term chelkit is machlik or machalik, slippery. Okay, lahachlik is to slip. Machlik is slippery. Tsafui, expected. Naki, I'm not sure why I put this in here, but it's a good one to always have. It doesn't just mean clean, but also can mean fresh or natural. Wind, ruach and ruchot, very important when it comes to winter in Israel. There can be quite a lot of, ruchot ezot, strong winds, fierce winds. We had the word lach before, humid. Now we have its noun, right? Lach is an adjective. It means humid. Humidity is lachut. Okay, so the humidity outside also tells you often when it's going to rain or how, especially when it's hot out, how uncomfortable it's going to be. But when it's cold out, it often signifies how soon it's going to rain, if at all. Along with humidity is another term we talked about, ratuv, wet. We have retivut. Retivut means moisture. Okay, this is very important for many of our homes in Israel do not come insulated. So it's going to be important to check on moisture in the house. Often that turns into condensation on our windows and our walls and turns into a couple things we're seeing on this list in just a few terms. But retivut is going to be very important as we cook and there's steam coming out and it's filling our homes. Our homes, the walls, the ceilings are not necessarily built to deal with that in a way that doesn't result in what we're about to see in a few words from here. Nizila, leak. This is also very common in wintertime when it rains, again, because homes are often not insulated enough for rain, especially in the center of the country, and especially older homes. And as a result, you might get leaks in your walls, in your ceilings, because rain simply seeps through the cracks. And cracks that you didn't even know about until it rains, and then all of a sudden you see a nizila, or more importantly, you start hearing one, a drip and drop of a nizila, a leak. Okay. I was just talking about the moisture in one's home and what it can lead to. Ovesh. Ovesh is a very common thing in Israel. I know many Anglos, myself included, who get very embarrassed this time of year with regards to finding ovesh in their house. Sometimes it's black, sometimes it's red. You are not the only person in 9 million strong Israel who has to encounter ovesh in the winter. No matter how nice your place is or new, oftentimes there is going to be ovesh in the winter. All you need to do is simply clean it up. What works always best is economica, if you have white walls, or some sort of bleach to kill it. But you do want to take care of mold, as it can be hurtful to your body and lungs and the people around you. Ovesh is the noun. The adjective is meubash. Okay, meubash could be both something. It could also be food, obviously. Mold grows on food, as we know. But meubash is the adjective. Meubash, meubeshet, meubashim, meubashot. Okay, and finally, I used the word condensation before. I want to throw that in, even though we usually more talk about ovesh in Israel in the winter than we do about condensation, but it is important, is ibui. Okay, ibui is condensation. So the steam that you've been creating through taking a shower or cooking or whatever it may be turns into condensation on the walls, on the windows. Also something you want to clean up before it turns into ovesh. Okay, and finally, as our last category in wintertime in Israel, at least for this evening, we're going to get into some foodstuffs, and then with the time remaining, go into your Q&As that you've been leaving during this lesson. Some of these words you'll know, some of these you may not know their context or you may have never heard before. The first one is simple enough, marak. Marak is soup. Soup is always a good option, especially in the winter. It's hydrating, it's nourishing, all those things, marak, simply soup. Those of us who come from either hardier climates or have served in the army in Israel know this term, daisa. Daisa can mean porridge, it can mean farina, or cream of wheat. Anything that is a porridge of some sort of wheat or grain mixed with water, sometimes with milk. This is not the same as saying oatmeal. Oatmeal, you're going to use the word oatmeal, shibolet shual. This is some other iteration of a grain. Farina or cream of wheat is usually some sort of ground up wheat. Oh, there I am again, at least on my screen. Hi. Porridge is also some sort of grain. This term is also used in talking about grits. Those of you who are from below the Mason-Dixon line, you know the term grits. But daisa is any kind of porridge, very popular in the winter as well. Nice and hot, again, nutritious. The word for stew, there are other words that are used. Often they have to do with the vessel in which you cook a stew in, but one of the words you're going to see a lot is nazid. Nazid is often a term that we use for stews that have a predominantly large amount of vegetables in them, but it's a great word to know, especially in the winter, nazid, stew. Excuse me. Sachlav, you've probably heard this word before, you didn't know what it was, you think it's something else, you're right altogether. Sachlav means an orchid, O-R-C-H-I-D. The tradition goes that there is a popular Middle Eastern drink, also called sachlav. We call it Hebrew sachlav. In Arabic, it's sahlab. In Turkish, it's salib. And it comes from the root of an orchid. The root of an orchid is both nutritious and very starchy. If you pound it, very specific types of orchids, by the way, not the ones that you buy that look beautiful and sit on your windowsill and you forget how to water it and it's temperamental and all that. That's not this. It's a specific type of orchid, usually grows in Turkey, but also elsewhere in the Middle East. You pound the root into this very starchy, thick thing. You combine it with water or milk and some flavorings and serve it warm. Nowadays, we usually don't make it out of orchid. It's usually made out of cornstarch or some other kind of vegetable starch. It's a very popular wintertime drink. It's served warm, if not very hot. Sometimes it's topped with shaved coconut and peanuts. Sometimes it's flavored with rose water. It's very sweet. It's very hot. It's very nourishing. You can think of it like porridge. It's just usually not made out of the normal things that go into porridge, and nowadays it's not normally made with orchids just because of preservation. There aren't enough orchids to make sachav, but it's a very popular drink. You can find it throughout Israel and by extension the Middle East when it's winter, as it's a very warm, soothing drink to have. Tzir. Tzir is an interesting word. Tzir in our food context right now means broth or stock. So tzir bakar is both beef stock or beef broth. Tzir off is chicken stock or chicken broth. It can also mean a delegate to a convention. It can also mean a hinge. It can also mean an axis. Tzirim is also a term used for contractions. This is a very popular word, but in our context, it only means broth or stock. Okay, and it means both, by the way. It's not, there isn't a separate word. Klembo. Klembo is a very, very important Israeli wintertime food. We often refer to this as wintertime ice cream. We did not invent klembo in Israel. We would like to take credit for it, but we even agreed that we didn't create it. It was a confectionery, a dessert that was created in Northern Europe. We usually trace it to Denmark. Some people say Germany, but usually Denmark takes the cake. Think of it like a marshmallow, a malomar, excuse me. A cookie or a biscuit that has marshmallow fluff on it and then is covered in chocolate. Okay, that's why it has this feeling of ice cream, because it looks like an ice cream cone. The cookie takes the form of the cone. The marshmallow fluff is the ice cream, and the chocolate, whether we dip it in chocolate or we just like chocolate ice cream, is that. In Israel, the big brand that you see everywhere is Strauss, and it either comes individually on a counter by the cash register in a store, or it's sold in packs, usually in plastic packs, and it comes in 2 flavors: vanilla, mocha. Okay, all of them are covered in chocolate. You can find designer crembos at bakeries and certain stores. We're not talking about other wintertime foods. We're going to talk about that next week, and I'll preview next week in a few minutes. But just know crembo is a very popular Israeli wintertime treat. And the word itself comes from 2 Hebrew words: creme, cream, bo, in it or inside. So you put this together, crembo, cream inside. Okay, that's what crembo means. And finally, this one many of you know, but it's a good one to remind you about, that it's particularly popular in the winter, although people make it all year round, is what we call in Israel chunt. Okay, sometimes people will add another syllable in there and they'll say chulent, but most of the time people will say chunt. Or, and this is very important depending on what diaspora background Israeli Jews are coming from, they might call it chamin. Okay, chunt, chamin, both ideas of the traditional Shabbat stew that is served Saturday afternoons, that's been allowed to cook overnight, but it's very popular as it's usually cooked in a slow cooker overnight. It's served warm, it's a stew, it's very popular in the winter. There are many other names for it, by the way, depending on what Jewish community you're coming from in the world. If you're coming from Iraq, it's known as tabit. If you're coming from other parts of North Africa, dafina. I'm not going to go to all of them, just know they're often referred to as either chunt, and that's how you would say it in modern Hebrew, chunt. It's a very strong word to say, or chamin. Chamin coming again from that word cham, hot. And with that, I'm going to stop here and take as many questions as I can in the little time that we have left, starting from the top. Okay. Someone asked, can we get a printout of these words? Like I said, part of our new upgrade here, you will be getting access to this spreadsheet. Where and how is to be announced, but just know this, and in future lessons, you will be getting a copy of this list. So if you didn't have time to write down the words, don't worry, you will get access to it. We'll make sure that you do in the short, near time future. I found that tights in Israel are really leggings. So is pantyhose what we would call tights in the US? Yes, Julie. Pantyhose is, think sheer pantyhose, right? That's what we mean by galbionim. Galbionim are pantyhose in the sense of, the sheer leggings that we put on, whereas tights are something thicker. That's really the difference I want to emphasize here. Pantyhose is thin, if not, that semi-transparentness that pantyhose is. Tights are thicker, whether it's leggings or tights. But tights, thick, galbionim, thin. Chutlot is how we say this term here. This is just, again, chutlot. There is another word. This is just how my automatic vowel generator created this word. Whoever asked about the vowels on here, I put the vowels in here for those of you who are learning Hebrew to read Hebrew. But as you know, in modern Hebrew, we don't write with the dots and bars known as nikud. I put them in there as a courtesy, but the transliteration is how we speak it. This one, again, it's not a common word to use, so it's chutlot. If you are that concerned about knowing how to pronounce leg warmers going into a store, chutlot. Apologize that it reads differently. Okay. Dubon is also a teddy bear. Yes. Someone just asked, is Dubon that I used here for weatherproof coat is also a teddy bear? That's where it comes from. Again, dove, a bear that has weatherproof fur for when it's cold and wet outside. Okay, I've answered the questions. Is there a recording of this? Absolutely. It'll be on YouTube in the near future. Tzvi, how would you say the soup is warming me? Ha-marak mechamem oti. Okay, the soup can also be the adjective in that it's warming, in the sense of it's warming you up. You could also say, I'm being warmed up by the soup. אני מתחמם על ידי המרק. But either way, it's just a matter of which way you want to say it. But המרק מחמם אותי. The soup is warming me up. Simple as that. Okay. Anna asks a great question as we're talking about weather and winter wear. How do you say fur and faux fur? Great question. Let me write that here. Writing that as I'm answering this question. Fur, what do we say? And faux fur. Great question, Anna. Thank you for asking it. So the word for fur in Hebrew is parva or parva. It's spelled exactly like the term parve, which means that it's neither milk or meat, but parva in modern Hebrew means fur. Okay, fur of any kind. Parva malachutit means faux fur. Malachuti means artificial, right? It has been man-made. Melacha, it means work. So malachuti, it's industrial, it's man-made, it's artificial. Let me write that in the transliteration box here. Parva, mal'a, chuti. It's feminine. Great question. Thank you for asking. Parva or parva malachutit, fur or faux fur. Julie, would it be proper to say what you wrote? I'm not going to say it aloud to confuse everyone. To say, I am not cold, lo kar li. Okay, lo meaning not, kar cold, li to me. Simple as that. Lo kar li, I am not cold. Lo cham li, I am not hot. That's how we would say it. No other way to say it. But thank you for asking. Okay, a lot of suggestions, not necessarily questions, but thank you all for writing them in the Q&A. I'm just trying to go through them as they're relevant in the little bit of time that I have left. Susan, how does one say chance of as in chance of rain? Great question, Susan. You will hear the word chance. I hate that word, but you will hear it. But the word that really means chance in Hebrew is, I don't know why I did that. Let me write this here. There it is. Chance. Sikui. Sikui is chance. Right? And this is feminine. Sikui is chance. So yesh sikui, there's a chance. Ein sikui, there's no chance. So yesh sikui legeshem, there's a chance of rain. Okay? That's how you would say it. Yesh sikui legeshem. There's a chance for rain. Okay. Michael asks, can we search past Cafe Oleh episodes by topics? Great question, Michael. Like I said before, all of our previous lessons are on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. You will see a whole playlist of them, and they're by topics. So you can scroll through, pick the ones that you want to go through by topics. Absolutely. Okay, unfortunately, we're going to need to break here right now. Toda rabba again. Thank you all so much for joining us here. Like I said, this is our brand new session, winter session of Cafe Oleh, and our new upgraded version. Those of you who are in Israel, we will be announcing in person age-based groups for in-person conversation. And many of those in-person groups are going to be using these exact words and topics that we learned about on Mondays and putting them into sentences and actually practicing using them aloud and with each other when we meet in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and hopefully throughout the country as well. So stay tuned with Nefesh B'Nefesh for upcoming sessions on that. With regards to online classes with Nefesh B'Nefesh with Cafe Oleh, we will be here next Monday and through December and January and through the month of February for the winter session. Next week, as it is the week before the start of Chanukah, we will be talking about all things Chanukah. If you thought you knew how Chanukah works, I want to be sure that you are completely in the loop of how Chanukah in Israel operates slightly different, some important words to know, how things are spelled, how things are not spelled, what sort of food to expect, and things like that. So next week is Chanukah. Come with your questions then, or hope they're answered in advance. Please be in touch with Nefesh B'Nefesh with any other topics you have for that you'd like us to cover. Toda rabah. Thank you all so much. Lihitraot. See you all next week. Take care.